Every year I'm honored to do a show to honor International Women's Month. And for those who have been with me for some time, you've heard about my mom. She was my hero. And long after she left us, she remains the most important person in my life. My mom kept a roof over our heads, sewed the clothes we wore, and had to cope with my father who suffered from mental illness and self-medicated with alcohol and gambling. She never gave up because she refused to give us up. I'm so happy that what I learned from watching this 5-foot French-Canadian, creativity, her resilience, her ability to carry on, is not only part of me, but part of my 2 beautiful daughters. There's so many women in my life who have mattered to me personally and who have inspired me. I truly believe that if our world was run by women, there'd be no wars. Our dollars would be invested in healthcare and education, in nurturing and caring for each other, for society and our planet. So to all the women in my life who have helped me on my journey, and for all the women out there forging your own extraordinary paths in life, and more often than not helping others get to where they need, want, and deserve to go, a standing ovation for all you do, and for the many ways that you matter.
This is Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
My guest today is Alana Stott. Her story is one of triumph over tragedy, and her website says it all. Her purpose in life is to empower women to thrive in every aspect of life. Alana's superpowers are her core values of femininity, toughness, integrity, respect, kindness, and giving back. Her mission is to show that women can do it all and anything is possible when they lead with their strengths and refuse to give up. She was recently awarded an MBE from King Charles. Alana Stott, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Thank you. Hi, for having me.
So we have so much to cover, and where I would love to begin the show is for you to read the opening paragraph of your book.
The sound of gunfire echoed through the receiver of the telephone. As I stood there in the kitchen of the home we had created together, the past 5 years flashed before my eyes. Would our daughter remember him? Would she remember how he made her laugh? How they'd sang and played together? How they danced to Magic Dance by David Bowie in Labyrinth and mocked me for never quite getting the appeal? Dean, tell me what's happening. My heart was racing, my blood was pumping, but my husband on the other side of the world, I appeared as I always did, calm and together. You never show them how you feel. You keep it together. You have to hold it together because when you fall apart, everything falls apart. This was my life. I stayed home with a baby and managed our various businesses, including our security business we'd set up when he left his life as a Tier 1 operator with the UK Special Forces. He was away more than he was ever home, and on his return I was usually cleaning blood off his shirts or hoovering sand and residue from his Rolling Thunder bags. Residue that often transferred to our own things, such as an embarrassing episode travelling through an airport security when my 10-month-old pushchair tested positive for explosives. I had to convince the customs that I and my baby girl had no intention of blowing up the plane that day. While he was on the ground with clients, I was home, sorting logistics, typing up security proposals, writing evacuation plans, and keeping him up to date with real-time data from various sources about whatever was happening in the world at that time. Wherever there was trouble in the world, Dean was usually not very far away. But this call was different. He sounded different. Not scared, that wasn't a sound I would recognise anyway. It was worried, anxiousness and disturbance in his voice. I had to stay calm and focused. I needed to get as much information as I could, as I had no idea how long the line was going to stay active. I needed his exact location, who he was with and what the current situation was. Every little detail could prove crucial information. It was 2014 in Libya, and I would actually be surprised if I didn't hear gunfire in the background. Over the summer of 2014, Libya descended into civil war between 2 opposing militia, both with the aim of taking control of the government after Gaddafi was out. Arab Spring had brought a new way of life to northern Africa, and had given ISIS a fresh opening on the Mediterranean coastline. Dean had been there before, during and after it all, and the ringing sound of bullets and fireworks were never far away when he called. This time, however, the sound was different. The blast sounded close by, multiple, and my sixth sense, my gut feeling, or whatever you might call it, told me this time it was different. I knew he was on the ground near the UK Special Forces troops. However, I was acutely aware they were there to observe only. If there was trouble on the ground, Dean would be on his own. He had allies there though. Dean always made friends with the local and they were always drawn to him. If they were in trouble, he would protect them against anything. That was what worried me. The selfish part of me wanted him to walk away from trouble and put us to the front of his mind. But my heart knew different. That was why we fell in love. Neither of us was the type to stand back and watch someone get hurt. We were both raised tough. We learned to look after ourselves and look after the vulnerable, and I knew neither of us could ever walk away from someone in danger. The gunfire was getting louder and louder. I heard the phone drop to the ground as loud bangs pierced into my ears. The sound penetrated my ear so much I had to pull it away to stop my eardrums exploding. These bangs were coming directly beside the phone. Is he being fired upon, or is Dean the one firing? I can't tell. In this situation, he must keep his focus. Do I hang up the phone? What if he needs me? What if I can't get back through? He had other colleagues and business partners who should have been helping him. But as usual, when Dean was on the front line taking risks, they could usually be found sipping wine and counting the profits. Who could I call? There was no one. Dean was on his own and I couldn't hang up. As I sat there on the kitchen floor, another loud bang came. This time much closer to me. The kitchen door flew open and a 3-year-old came running in saying, "Mummy, I'm hungry." Hungry. Wow, she picks her moments. Why doesn't she understand appropriate timing yet? But up I got from the floor, phone still in hand, painted on that big mum smile, placed my hand over the receiver and asked her quietly what she would like. When you live this kind of life, you have to balance everything. She didn't understand what I did and what I was doing at any given moment in time any more than he understood what the other side was like. I had to keep the chaos as calm and normal as I could for both of them. I was the mum, wife, businesswoman, housekeeper, peacekeeper and family accountant. And I had to be all these things at the same time while not allowing any role to influence the other. I gave Anthony Gato a run for his money. Everything had to operate together while carrying its individual traits and skills. With Molly's demands the most pressing priority, I quickly pulled together some snacks with questionable health benefits, though at this point I genuinely didn't care. I turned on some back-to-back Peppa Pig in the lounge and got back on the call as quickly and calmly as I could. I listened for a while and then heard his voice. "Babe, can you check with the embassy? The Zintanis are attacking the freeway. They have the civilians pinned down in the car and are firing from bridges. They have an elevation advantage and these people have no way to get out. Our guys are not allowed to engage and can only observe." I tried to gauge which bridge and where they could be, but the gunfire was getting louder and louder and I needed more information. "Dean." "They're on their own, Alana," he paused. "I have weapons, I can't leave them." "Dean." "Alana, I love you." A hail of gunfire rang through my ears as the line went dead. I'm not ready for this.
Such a powerful opening to your book. And we'll get back to that phone call with Dean, but in many ways, it's also a metaphor for who you are. When I read your entire book, you were always left handling things, managing things, keeping 1,000 balls in the air. And it's almost like this is whether, I don't know if this is your curse or your calling, but let's sort of wind it back to your childhood because I was so moved at how you were never really allowed to be a child. You're almost Cinderella in terms of how you were taking. So just maybe take us back. Let's even begin with the Sunday morning in June when you were 7 and your world turned upside down.
Yeah, I think up to the point of 7, I always do, we never ever had anything. We never had money or anything like that, but we always had love in our house. My mom, my dad, my older brother. I remember a lot of fun in the kind of 5, 6 years old. 7 years old was when I remember quite vividly just being stood at the window and me and my brother, and he was just super honest. My big brother was just like honest guy. And we were looking out the window and I said, what are we looking for? What are we waiting for? And my dad pulled up and it was really strange because my dad lived with us, didn't he? Like, why was he pulling up in a car? And my brother just turned around to me and said, they're getting divorced, mum and dad are through. And I remember that looking at him, this little girl looking up at her big brother, just that brutal honesty of, well, what does this mean? Is everything going to be different now? Is everything going to change? And just not understanding that was almost the moment that it was all about to change.
You describe your dad as, you're a daddy's girl. He was the apple of your eye. You'd go shooting pool and stuff. So it must have been just traumatic to know that anchor and that rock and that person that really probably understood you more than anybody in the world was now, I'm not saying abandoning your family, certainly not going to be a permanent part of it.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I was completely daddy's girl. And I did grow up, the area that we grew up in, like a lot of areas in the 80s, I guess, was surrounded by divorce. So it wasn't like I didn't understand divorce. I'd seen my friends' parents split up, but I didn't think it was happening to us. But to not have him there every night, doing, he used to tuck me in and tuck my brother in. And then at the weekends, he would come and get me out of bed and my brother would have to stay in bed. And that, I remember those little moments of just mum and dad and me time. So for him not to be there every day was definitely going to be strange. I think I knew at that time it was going to be strange. The one benefit that I did have was so many kids around us, the fathers were gone, they left and that was it. Whereas when dad left, he always saw us, so Sunday was always our day to play pool, as you say. So it was always that way. And I guess it wasn't until I grew up that I realized that there was a lot more to it. With my mum, she dealt with the real life stuff, the Monday to Saturday, real life, everything that was going on. And dad got that fun time. So probably in my head, this was like, he was the best thing since sliced bread, because our kind of 11 till 5 on a Sunday was fun and exciting and playing pool, so, and I think it kind of made me have a little bit of resentment to my mom because she wasn't fun. Like, she was just working all the time and shouting at us all the time. So I kind of associated dad with being the awesome one and mum with being the more tyrannical one, which is, as we know, completely untrue.
And you describe your mum, though, as, working several jobs, but even in the social housing, she made it your house. And I could almost see the smile when I was reading your book that she did what she could. She
did, yeah. I mean, the area that we were in, it really wasn't the best. And, I had friends who had houses who, had no wallpaper and no carpets, and they would just put things down on the floor, Whereas when mum would get the keys to a house, so the one that we moved into, it was like, the smell of it was horrendous when we first opened the door, and it was like, we're going to live here. This is horrible. And she would literally go in and she would completely gut the place out. She would clean it. She would do the wallpaper and she would put carpets down. She would beg, borrow and steal things, but then it became a house. It was just a beautiful home that would always smell nice and fresh, was always clean. We always had clean clothes. She was pretty remarkable how she could do that.
The other side, which seemed to be quite resentful, though, at the same time, that when your dad left, it created a vacuum and she wasn't afraid to fill it with a lot of different men.
Mum didn't know how to be alone. I think that was the problem. She always felt like she needed a man in her life to complete her, which was so far from the truth because she had all these abilities. But I think she just felt like she needed to be loved. But unfortunately, she attracted the wrong type of people who weren't giving her the right type of love. So it was something that for me, it taught me that, like, I 100% do not need a man. But it was something that she had, that she just felt like she needed that to complete her, I guess.
And then the other sort of force of human nature in your life was Aunt Molly. What role did I wish people could see your wonderful smile. I mean, you just lit up when I said Aunt Molly. So tell us why Aunt Molly is making you smile so much.
Auntie Molly, she was born in 1924. So kind of lived her teenage life during the war. So that was the stories that I always remember her talking to me about. And she was a single woman her entire life. She never dated. She never married. She just had this life, but she never had children, which was crazy because she was the most amazing person around children. But she had nieces, nephews, great nieces, great nieces and nephews. She had so many people around her anyway. And she was just a force. She would just, like, she died at 95 in 2020, and she was still up to that point walking a mile every day. She still went shopping for the older people, in her area. So you could see her at 80 years old shopping for like the 65-year-olds in her little community. But she was the one who every Friday I would go around and spend the night at her house. So it was digestives and a cup of tea was our nightly routine while watching TV. I would sleep in her bedroom on the little sofa bed. we would go, shopping on a Saturday, get all the old people's messages. And she kind of taught me, she was the one, you get on the bus, if somebody elderly gets on, you stand up and you give them your seat, you carry people's bags if they're too heavy, just every little thing she would teach me, that helping other people was more important than anything in the world. So who she was as a person just has always stayed with me, and I was incredibly close to her.
Another very traumatic happening in your life obviously was at age 8, a terrible accident.
Yeah, that was, we'd gone out for what we would call a car boot sale. I think you call it like a garage sale or something. And we'd come home and I decided I was going to make the tea, and my granda, he was a bit of a craftsman, and he'd built this stool, and the breakfast bar where I was making the tea was a bit high. So I stood on this stool and I had this huge earthen kettle. It was like a big steel kettle thing. And I kind of, as I was walking on the stool, I slipped over and the whole thing came down on me. And yeah, I was badly burnt. And actually my mum thought I'd stabbed myself that night, because when I screamed and then ran through to her, I was kind of clutching my belly apparently. And I think she was immediately like, as any mother would, she just went into, her mum mode and took the clothes that I was wearing off, which I later found out wasn't the best thing to do, because you're ripping a lot of skin off, covered me in cold water, wrapped me in a blanket and took me down to the hospital. But that was where I would stay for the next 6 months or so. And
in it, they found out you also had appendicitis. I mean, you just don't do anything lightly, do you? I mean,
you've got to take the positive from the negative. And actually, I think it was 24 hours or so I was in hospital. I was being sick a lot. And they thought it was shock. They thought because I got put into this incubation unit thing for infection, because I was highly infectious when you've been burnt. So I was in this unit and I was just being really sick all the time. And they said first of all, they said shock, and then they said, no, there's something else. Then they done the quick check. They found out I had appendicitis, and they said they needed to get me down to the theatre immediately. And it was on the way to the theatre that my appendix burst. So if I hadn't been in hospital, I might not have got there quick enough because the appendix burst. That's the point that the poisoning starts to happen. So,
and then just another curveball, which is an American expression or Canadian expression, comes out. Your mom has a baby, and you now have a little brother called Adam.
Yeah. So it was actually while we were in hospital, and I used to get these dressings every day that if anybody's ever been burnt, they'll know that you get them put on, then you have to take them, and it's the most painful, horrible thing every day. So I was getting these dressings one day, and Mum just fainted while I was doing it, because I was always in a bit of pain. And then that's when I found out when I got home for a weekend visit that it was actually because she was pregnant that she'd fainted. And then Adam was born. So he was Mum's partner at the time. He was a lot younger than her, and they were still going through that phase of just wanting to be together. So I guess Adam went straight into my room when he was born, and then he almost became, I always used to refer to him as my own. So, well,
certainly as the book, and I'm going to encourage people to read this wonderful book. And I'm just trying to get through this childhood, because I would have kind of just checked out by now. And then we find out that your best friend, Wendy, age 10, gets raped.
And it was funny because at the time we didn't call it rape, which is crazy. But I remember when she told me, she'd had sex with this boy, and it was never thought of that this guy, like from 10-year-olds, it was this older guy liked her, and he, done this thing with her, and we were like, whoa, you're like so grown up now. It wasn't, I remember at the time, it wasn't like abuse. It didn't come across like that. Obviously, everything that I know now, I know exactly what happened, and I know exactly what was going on, and why it then made Wendy spiral into the world that she went into. But yeah, we were way too young to be experiencing those types of things.
How much of your society at this time, talk about your mom just wanted people to love her. And when you're in such dire situations, do you feel that people like your friend Wendy is so much more vulnerable to an older man showing up with, kind phrases and pretending that he's Prince Charming?
Yeah. And nothing's changed to this day. The only difference is we've now got the internet. Makes it a little bit easier for that Prince Charming to get to you, because when you're going through these types of worlds where you're vulnerable, where the only people that you are talking to is your peers, when your parents aren't either active or able to be active as much in your life, then you are turning to other people. And when you are going through a lot of different things, a person does need love. We can be as tough and pretend to be as tough as we want, but a person always needs that hug or that love or that emotional support. And these guys know exactly what they're doing.
A couple of years later, you guys have sort of discovered weed. And then someone comes over and brings heroin. And it's probably one of the biggest decisions you had to make.
Yeah. And again, didn't realize at the time that it was going to be that. I think throughout life, you've always got those crossroads that you come up to that you might not realize how big a junction it is until later on. But yeah, she had, we were, smoking weed and we were doing silly things, but the girl made this offer to us. And I had a few different things. First of all, I knew about heroin. I'd heard about heroin. We grew up in that, and I didn't want to be part of that. I didn't have the intention, no matter how much she was trying to sell it to us, how amazing it was. I feel like I just had stronger responsibilities. I had Adam, I had other things, and I'd seen how it was. Wendy had her own way of thinking, and she decided that she was going to take this option. And yet just changed her world forever, really. Do
you think your strength came because you had to grow up so quickly? Because Adam really was your child. I mean, the way, you describe it in the book, I mean, you did everything. Like, you should have been a young kid going out, having fun, doing all sorts of stuff. But your entire life was sort of scheduled around Adam and school, leaving very little to be a kid. Yeah.
And I think that, my dad used to get angry. My older brother was able to say, no, I'm going out. I'm not doing that. It's your job, Mum. I wasn't. And even to this day, I don't see other people's responsibilities necessarily as not mine. I see that if there's a problem, if there's an issue, if something needs done, I kind of get involved and deal with it. And just like with Adam he had needs that needed to be met. And did I choose to be the one that met them? Probably, yeah. Probably I did make those decisions that I wanted to make sure he was going to get these needs, so I was going to be the one that was going to do it. I just had an amazing amount of love for him when he was born.
If there's any more pressure we can put on, age 13, your mom's in an abusive relationship and someone's coming after her with a knife, and you have to somehow find a way to save her life.
Again, selecting the wrong man. She chose this guy, and he was a salesman. He used to sell windows and doors, and she started dating him. They'd had a lot of fights before they broke up, got back together, broke the usual cycle of abuse, which I kind of detail a bit more in the book of what that is. But she'd split up with him this one time, and we used to have this old council house, social housing door, and it was like rock solid. You couldn't get past this door. Well, when they'd got back together, he'd bought her this amazing new door that he wanted to treat her to this new door. Looking back on it, we obviously know why, but it was like a UPVC door. So the next time he got high and drunk, he came back to the house. I think they'd split up again. He was coming back with anger to her. And when he tried to break into the door, he was able to kick the whole of the middle of it down, and came through the middle. But my brother had taken my mum upstairs. So I was downstairs, and I could see that he was high. I could see that he was angry, that kind of red eye look. And he was saying he wanted to kill her. He wanted to get to her. And I was kind of just blocking the stairs, trying to stop him getting up the stairs, but without showing that I was blocking him getting up the stairs. So I was just trying to chat to him and try and keep him a bit calmer and to kind of de-escalate the situation. And yeah, then he grabbed a knife out of the kitchen, and we managed to get him outside, but just through the talking. And then he was circulating the garden when the police arrived. And then he managed to get away and run away. But we found out later on that it was to do with, I think he thought that his friend had been after my mom or something. So he'd end up putting a glass bottle in his friend's face, and then he was coming to kill my mom. So it was we'd managed to convince him that she wasn't in the house and that he left.
It wasn't we, it was I. You're 13 years old. You're not a trained terrorist negotiator and you're diffusing the system. And then people are going to just go, okay, how many things can you throw at you? Your mom, who, you know, you love dearly, dies of cancer at 36 years old. And to me, the saddest part, and I don't mean this in a horrible sense to your mom, because I hope she's listening to this interview, but it's the fact they take Adam away from you.
Yeah, and I did, you know, she got sick and we almost didn't believe that she was going to die. You know, it's like with anything, it's that closing yourself off to reality. And I think it was it was actually Adam's birthday, we found out it was terminal cancer, and it was the April that she died. And I was 15 at this point, and Adam's dad had been gone for quite a while. And I believed that I could take him. And actually my mum had asked that I did keep him, but my dad had said that he would be the kind of official guardian, but I would be looking after him. And I think for my dad, he just decided that he didn't want that for me. He wanted me to have a life. So he then said at the final hour that he wasn't going to take Adam. And I then decided, well, I still want to do it. I'm still going to fight. But, you know, at 15, when Adam's dad came back, I think Adam's dad's parents had said they would support. So they came back and said, they wanted him, and there wasn't much I could do really to fight at that point because the courts weren't really siding with a 15-year-old. So yeah, he got custody and moved him away down to England. Tell me
a little bit about Marion, the beautiful redhead girl. I also tell you, my wife is named Marion. She's redhead and from Scottish descent. So I'm interested to just how this became part of the story.
Well, Marion came into life when I was traveling in Australia, and it was just a really strange circumstance. I was talking to her about it the other day because she read the book for the first time as well, and she was having a bit of a cry about it. And I was saying that I'd gone through life up to this point after I'd left the UK and done some traveling and bits and pieces. I'd gone through life to this point pretty lonely. I'd almost got used to just being on my own, and I bumped into her in a bar in Manly in Sydney in Australia, and I just heard the voice and I was like, I kind of recognized that accent. Let's have a chat. And then we found out we actually grew up, you know, about 10 miles apart from each other. We knew a lot of the same people, and it turned out she was on her own traveling as well. So we just became pretty much instant friends, and then we've stayed that way ever since. But I never really told her until I wrote it in the book how much that meeting meant to me and how important it is to have somebody in your life that makes you feel that little bit less lonely, I guess. I also have to fast forward the story a little bit. I mean, I wish I had 4 hours to talk to you, but through all of this, you've become very accomplished at work. You're not supposed to be. The people are judging your biases. You don't have an education. You're a woman, a pretty young thing. And yet you turn around and go, I'm actually really damn good at what I do. And so just sort of compress a little bit about how you started to realize that you could do anything. I think for everything that I was ever put down for, or, you know, the area that I grew up in, how I looked, you know, my weight, anything that would maybe be a criticism towards me, I always knew that I had intellect, and it was one thing that I knew people couldn't take away from me. I don't know. My dad always says he has no idea where it came from, but it's always been learning and growing and educating myself has always been something I've really, really enjoyed doing. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm always learning more about that specific subject or what I'm in. So even if I had to start at the bottom, I wanted to make sure there was a path that I could get to the top really quick. So any job that I applied for, I had to know that there was a way up. I didn't care if I wasn't getting paid. If I was just getting paid in commission, that's cool, because I can hit targets and I can strive towards them. So I never felt entitled. I guess that was the really important part for me, that I always worked really hard. And because of all the things that people said were against me, you know, you're from the wrong area, you're blonde, you're a girl, whatever it might be, I kind of ignored it and just went, I'm just going to do show and be who I am. And I also didn't have any real ego around it. It was just about me being who I knew I could be and that was the one area that I knew that I would always be able to be good at. You
didn't just sort of brush against the glass ceiling, though. You're 25 years old. You're running 3 bank branches. You've got your first car, your home. And, what did it feel like to have that security for the first time in your life that none of this could be taken away from you?
When I first bought I bought the house that my mum passed away in. So that was really important to me that I would go back and I would do that one day. And I still own it now. It's one of the ones that, they say don't have a personal attachment to property, but that one I'm making an exception for. But yeah, I knew that I had my career, I had money in the bank, I owned properties, I had all this sorted so that I wasn't going to ever feel that fear of not being able to eat or have those things. And I knew that along the way, I would always be able to look after Adam and help other people. It didn't take away from the loneliness because, that kind of, living in that castle with that moat and the gates and everything else, it keeps you safe, but it is still quite a lonely time.
We started the show off with you hearing Dean's voice on the phone, but I want you to tell us about the moment you walked into this bar, inadvertently took the wrong turn and ended up staring at this tattooed and ripped stranger. And how did that all come about? Yeah,
it's funny because we went back to film there a few months back. And I just still I don't know how it happened because this bar it was an old church. It had been converted into a bar. So the kind of aisles down the middle, you can either go in one way or the other. And I'd gone in one way and me and my friends had a drink and you actually went out the back door. So you literally just go down one side of the whole bar. And I remember just about to walk out the door and I stood and stopped and I said, no, girls, let's go around the other side. And they were like, no, we're done here. We're going somewhere else. And I was like, no, and there was something just saying, go back around the other side. And we walked around and there was this group of guys just stood there and I saw Dean immediately and he said, no, we're staying for one more. So we ended up staying and then that is how Dean came across, chatted to me and we met each other. So I don't even know to this day what that force was that pulled me back.
Tell us the story about Dean and the dining room table.
Yeah, this was Christmas and to this point I was still trying to convince myself that I could be with somebody, that I wasn't going to be alone. My family and friends had all almost put me in this box that I would always be alone. And I still wasn't 100%, but it was a Christmas. I'd just flown back from my brother's wedding in Australia and we were set for having Christmas. Now, Christmases had been a little bit difficult because the one before Mum had died, she was really sick, so she couldn't come down. And there was always but I always tried to make Christmas good. So this one year, I was having people round and I was excited about Christmas and I didn't have a dining room table and I was borrowing one and I couldn't get the dining room table to us because the van we had, it was very deep in snow. The van wouldn't turn on, so we couldn't get this table there. And Dean said to me, well, where is it? And I was like, well, it's a few miles up the road. The snow was deep. It was falling. And he said, well, I'll go and get it. And I was like, well, it's at least a couple of miles away. And he said, no, keep cooking. I'll be back soon. And it was like something out of a movie, like a couple hours later, just seeing him walking through the snow. And as I say, it wasn't the most amazing areas that we grew up in. So all the kids are throwing snowballs at him. And this table is just so big, just on his head, on his little bald head, just scraping along it as he's walking through the snow, like his legs kind of climbing through. And then I remember when he arrived at the door and he put it down and I tried to pick it up to carry it, and me and somebody else couldn't carry it through. It was that heavy. And he'd carried it all these miles just to make sure that we can have Christmas dinner together. And I think that was definitely the turning point for me saying, this is the guy.
And we should probably let the audience know what Dean did for a living that sort of had this sort of superhuman strength.
Yeah, Dean was in the UK Special Forces. So he was military since he was, his dad was military. He's always in that, but he was tier 1 SBS Special Forces.
And he's just not a prince of a man to bring and rescue the table. You find out he also knows a prince.
Yeah. So he was on a training course with Prince Harry when Harry joined as well. So him and Harry became fast friends. Dean's a bit of a joker, and I think he made a bit of a joke to Harry, and then they ended up getting partnered up and just became kind of lifelong friends from that point. And actually, when I met him, which I read in the book, but he told me, I'm going to introduce you to one of my friends, which was just like, yeah, okay, cool. We're going to introduce you to one of my friends. And then he literally just casually takes me over, and it's Harry. And it was like, okay, this isn't just a friend, Dean. Like, you could have given me a warning, but it turns out he was just a friend, you know, and that was the great thing about Dean. Dean treats you the same. It doesn't matter who you are. You're the same.
You finally let the drawbridge down and realize that this is the person that you're going to marry. And I want to get back to your story, but I'm just going to do one more story with Dean because, you know, Dean's always away training. He's doing special forces, has a horrific parachute accident, which kind of takes away his military career. For a while, that created a very different Dean, didn't it?
Yeah, I remember the moment he came back from Oman, and he'd had this parachuting accident. His leg had got trapped on the way out of the plane, and it got ripped. And I'm sure he'll tell you the full details, but he ended up in Oman for a few weeks because there was a volcanic eruption and he couldn't get flown out. So he was really in this bed in pain, high on all sorts of painkillers. And then when we finally got him home, we managed to get home on an Afghan plane that was coming through. I remember him arriving, and he was white, he was skinny. It was literally like I could see that this was a different person. The guy that had carried the table and done all these things, nothing was impossible. I just seen this, I won't say darkness, but just this new aura around him that I almost instantly knew that life was about to change again, and that we had to like step it up here, that he'd been there for me, and he'd managed to break down these walls, and the ice queen he used to call me, and now it was time for me to be there for him. Through all of this and this changing circumstances, you have this beautiful girl called Molly. Yes. Yeah, Molly came into our life while Dean was injured. And, you know, we were kind of still living on camp at the time. So I'd gone down to live with Dean. It was quite funny because I don't know if you've ever seen like a military camp, but the beds are kind of these 3/4 beds. So he's in this big, huge brace on his leg. I'm like huge and pregnant, and we're trying to sleep in this single quarters camp because we weren't married at the time. And then Molly was going to be born. So that's when we decided to move back to Aberdeen to have Molly, because I didn't want to have an English baby. We can certainly keep that into the episode because my Scottish wife will love that as well. So he's got to fill his vacuum. He's out of the special forces. You've got a baby. You've got lots going on, but he does need this thrill. I mean, you guys create a security company, but it's not going around wealthy neighborhoods with gated communities looking to see if there's a burglar. I mean, you two build a company that takes Dean to some of the scariest places in the world. Yeah, and I guess it just happened. We trained together in close protection. So I'd left the bank now. We both trained together, but now I'm having this baby. So everything that I'm going to have to do is going to be behind the scene while he's at the front. And, you know, when we were training in close protection, it was like, are we going to be like looking after celebrities? What are we going to be doing? But it just happened to be that Arab Spring happened at the same time. And everything was going on in North Africa at the time. So it was where he got instantly called to. So Libya just became a second home really for Dean. There was just so much going on there, and because of his skills, that was really naturally where he kept getting placed. And he formed friendships there. He formed alliances with people, so it kept getting pulled back there, and it really became a huge part of our life, Libya. Hi, it's Tony Chapman. When we return, I wrap up my International Women's Day special with Alana Stott. I offer my 3 takeaways, and then I go to my back library for a chat I had with Andrea Barrack, who's the Senior Vice President of Corporate Citizenship and ESG at RBC, for her wonderful words of wisdom. Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC, and the father of 2 beautiful children. International Women's Day is a time to celebrate women's achievements, and a big shout out to RBC for Speak Up for Inclusion and all they're doing to promote a gender-equal world. Across the country, RBC is speaking up by sponsoring events to encourage conversation, collaboration, and action. Fostering a gender-equal world matters to you, to me, to my daughters, and to RBC.
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
My guest today is Alana Stott, written a brilliant memoir called She Who Dares, And I dare you to find a story more compelling than hers. You're so wonderful the way you talk about Dean in your book, and almost humble at some of your accomplishments. And let's start with, I think King Charles just acknowledged you some way or not, didn't he not?
Yeah. So I got the email last December that said that I'd been awarded an MBE. So it's the member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire for my work with vulnerable women and mental health services. And I actually thought it was a spam email. I didn't think it was a real email until then at the end of December, it got announced in the press, the list of the recipients for the honour. Since receiving the MBE, I've been able to talk so much more about the work in human trafficking and the things that I do. So whereas I could sit here and say humbly, oh, we don't do it for the awards, it's been a blessing to get it because, it gives you that little bit more validation on what we're actually doing. And when we're talking to people, that is like a door opener, really. Talk
to me more about what you're doing with human trafficking, because it's probably one of the most frightening things that's happening around the world. I just did a show on it in Canada. And did it all begin with sort of how Wendy was seduced? Did it begin with the Prince Charmings that were trying to seduce your mother, that you just realized there's so many vulnerable women out there that have no idea that they're being drawn into this lair? Yeah, Wendy, my mom, what happened to me, I'm sure you read in the book, there's a few other instances with myself, and it was almost just seeing the abuse of women that I started looking into it. And then I found out more about the actual business of human trafficking and how people make money from the abuse of women and children. I mean, the abuse of everyone, but my focus has always been around that portion of the vulnerable society. But I kind of got taken into it because of the sex trafficking, and I learned about sex trafficking. But then as it kind of grew and I learned about domestic servitude and forced labour and organ harvesting, everything that's involved with human trafficking, I realised that to tackle it, it has to be tackled as a whole, and we can't just look at the one area. So I've always been focused on this preventative side of it. And it is talked about, there's certain things that happen around the world that brings it to attention, like movies can get released that brings an attention and people start talking about it. But it's when people say to me, oh no, have you heard what's going on right now? And it's like, oh, it's been going on forever and it's never really got worse or better. Yeah, I think the internet and various different things has changed the way that trafficking happens and changed how things go. But we've got more slaves in the world today than any other time in history. It's a $150 billion industry. So it's something that everybody can play their part in ending. And it's great when subjects can be talked about and when things happen, but it is really important to go out there and get the awareness and learn about the whole process of human trafficking. Your book, She Who Dares, is such an incredible title for you, but I'd also say She Who Does. Everywhere I turn, you're the one that is juggling 25 balls. It's almost like Auntie Molly is on your shoulder, because just if that's not enough, she'll throw another ball in. You're always finding different things to get involved with. Is there any limit to your capacity? I haven't found it yet. I don't think you're given more than you can handle. And I think even if you do, you can always take a breath and take a break. You can say, I do struggle to say no, especially if it's to do with helping people or to do with things that I have got the ability to help in. I do know that some of my friends are like, sometimes we just want to complain to you, Alana. Sometimes we don't want you solving the problem, but I find it really difficult. If somebody does come to me with a problem, I do want to try and fix it, but I also understand that I need to listen and just be there sometimes too. But I guess, and the one thing about Auntie Molly is Auntie Molly was the person who kept me humble. I remember even with Prince Harry, she used to get angry if he wouldn't smile. She didn't care what he was doing or how he was doing it. She just thought he should be smiling more. So she keeps she was never let you get your head into the clouds or let fame get in your way or anything like that. She would, make sure you stayed humble, you helped people, you done the right thing every single day. So she was my guide for that. So you're right. She probably is with me every day. And I want to end the interview on a couple of high notes. The first is Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding. How was that? And what did you take away? So that Dean broke the record on the 11th of May, and then they got married the week after. And when we got back, Dean had basically cycled from Argentina to Alaska, 14,000 miles, broke 2 world records as a disabled veteran. And every single question was,
how was Harry and Meghan's wedding? And it was really like, it was the weirdest day because we'd literally flown back from Alaska after he broke these records. We were together for the first time after about 4 months of being apart. He'd lost like 12 kilos during this. And all we wanted to do was get home and be with the kids. You know, we just wanted to have some family cuddles. And we're at this huge wedding where, you know, you've got Oprah and George Clooney and the Beckhams all around you. And we just wanted to be. So we done our usual security thing, which is we end up in a corner just on our own, kind of looking at everybody, just checking. And we were like, the amount of, you know, threats that could be in this room. And we were just observing that. But I think the magical moment for us was at one point, Harry had said, does anybody know how to play the piano? And Elton John put his hand up and got up and just started playing some music. So we were just sat in this hall in Windsor Castle watching Elton John play music to Harry and Meghan. I think that was a moment we looked at each other and went, this is quite cool.
And then you competed in the Miss World competition. And you decided to turn that platform less about you and much more to talk about your eating disorder.
Yeah, it was.
And I know I'm just throwing these things. Your listeners are going, what? Miss World? Where did that come from? You have to read She Who Dares to realize that I'm trying to do my best because there's so many things this lady's accomplished. But talk to me a bit about why you felt that was the perfect platform once again to make something out of an opportunity.
I never ever, as I say, the intellect was always my side that I focused on. So the beauty side of it was never something that I would even consider. But during Dean's bike ride, after having the babies, everything that we'd been through, I just wanted to do something that was for me. And when I seen the platform, it said about being, you know, empowering, about helping women. And I kind of read it as though this is something I could really get into, that I could share my stories about the human trafficking world and that I could go out and help people. But yeah, it did bring up that I had lived with an eating disorder most of my life. And this really was around, I guess it was probably the one thing I was able to control. You know, now I know more about this world. I understand that it was my one controlling mechanism through my whole life that I could use, and that I still fall back on. So even now to this moment, if something kind of happens a little bit, I'll have that little thing in my head. It doesn't really disappear from you. But I think for me, how I've tackled my eating disorder is by learning so much about it and finding out about the whole psychology around what an eating disorder is. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, you're not fat, so why do you have an eating disorder? But it's literally nothing to do with that at all. So, you know,
your book that's called She Who Dares, and we were talking off camera saying, I sadly can't read every book that's sent to me. I couldn't put yours down. It is a beautiful story. What are you most proud of?
Most proud of, I mean, obviously being a mom is my favorite part, but actually just writing the book, you know, I've wrote all my life. I've loved writing. My mum wrote, my granda wrote. We all kind of enjoyed that. But I decided to put She Who Dares out and I wrote it myself, word for word. I edited myself. I done everything around it. And that was really, really scary. Like that was like, because this is one of my passions, writing. What if people read it and be like, this is really terribly written or it's not? So that was like a really vulnerable moment to put it out. And the more that I'm hearing people's stories now, the more that people that are reading it and coming back to me and saying, well, you know, I've had this similar trauma, but I've never told anybody. I'm going to sit down and tell my family and friends tonight, or I've been through this, that to me. I'm like, well, I've done that and I was terrified to do it and it's gone out. And then probably second to that is when I done a skydive on Veterans Day. That was my daughter betting me that I'd be too scared to jump out of a plane, which I was, but I wasn't going to let her see that. So I jumped out of a plane. One and done.
And my last question is, for someone that never says no, what do you think your next dare will be?
I actually do know what it is, but I can't tell you yet. But and see if you can get it out of Dean. But Dean and I are going to do a challenge together that will be a world first, and it's going to be something I think that will be pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy, put it that way. But yeah, we'll be doing that and start training for that very soon. I always end my shows, Alana, with my 3 takeaways. And the first one is Auntie Molly teaching about responsibility, getting up for an elderly, helping somebody with the bag, and just realizing that no matter how tough things are,
other people are going to have things even tougher. She has stayed with you your entire life. She roars through you. The second one is, I loved that when you said, I always knew I had intellect and nobody could take that from me. And I think that's a great lesson in life for people. We all have a superpower. Sometimes bullies, sometimes circumstances, sometimes situations, they can try to compress, bury, tear it from you. But if you know you have it and believe in it, never let it go, because it can carry you forever. And my third takeaway is